Marvel and DC Chaos, Dumbledore powers unleashed across universes. Episode 71, Salisbury Plains. Under the night sky, the sea breeze from the northwest coast blows, the grass trembles slightly and emits a clear fragrance, and everything seems very quiet. But at this moment, the chirping of insects stopped abruptly, for rows of deep footprints spread out from a distance on the meadow, and they did not stop until they came to a corpse. In the next second, the broken and scorched corpse of the witch trapped in the dirt suddenly turned over by itself, which looked very strange. At this time, as 4 pairs of looming red rays in the air were revealed, 4 pairs of hideous and terrifying giant beasts slowly appeared from the air. It was the monster in the Temple of Darkness in Sithorn. At this moment, they watched the corpses under their feet stand still, as if thinking about something. It wasn't until a dozen breaths later that a sudden terrible change appeared. Without warning, the 4 giant beasts exploded into a mass of blood mist emitting scarlet light, and then penetrated into the witch's charred corpse. The next moment, this witch, who had long been dead and had no soul anymore, the charred black skin on her body began to peel off, and her flesh and blood quickly entangled and grew. After less than a minute, Luna's body was no longer scarred, and she stood up intact. But at this time, her expression was strange, her eyes were filled with darkness, and she was obviously not resurrected by herself at all. After a few seconds, the expression on Luna's face brightened a little. She raised her head and sniffed, then headed in the direction of Greenwich Village, hundreds of kilometers away. As she took a step forward, a black dress appeared on her body, and her face changed into another face. Inside the dimensional fragments, Russell floated in the air, with his eyes closed. His heart was emitting a soft glow at this time, and that was the refining dimensional core working. Suddenly, there was a continuous roar. The shattered earth began to gradually recover, and the crumbled floating boulders began to gather inward. Not long after, a complete continent with a plain in the center and mountains around it appeared suspended in dimensional space. Immediately after, countless energy points in the sky began to converge, gradually forming a huge ball. Russell's mind moved slightly, and the ball burst into flames, emitting dazzling light and temperature, forming a round of pseudo-yang. Then a castle rises from the ground. There are clear springs flowing around, and tender green saplings break through the soil and grow rapidly into forests. After doing all this, Russell opened his eyes and took a long breath. Since he completely controlled the dimensional core, he was like a god here. However, in the end, it is only a dimensional fragment. The universe origin energy is too rare, and most of it consumes his magic power, so he can only do this step now. It's still too little. Russell sighed. If the power of the origin of the universe is sufficient, he can completely transform this place into a small world with life, and the bigger and stronger the dimension grows, it will also feed back to him, the master, to become stronger. At this moment, Russell instinctively remembered the dark divine book that was still sealed by himself, and Seathorn's idea began in his heart. I just don't know how Gui stole the power of the dark dimension, and whether he can follow the example of stealing Sithorn. But it doesn't seem good to ask this kind of thing directly. Russell shook his head to dispel distractions. After all, this kind of thing is urgent and must be planned. Collecting his mood, Russell looked at the figure standing above the castle below. When looking at Hela below with an expression of a proud victor, Russell's face turned cold. Humph, bold demon, I want you to help me practice. Failure is the mother of success. Next time it must be my victory. Russell turned pale and hid in Nick Fury's office brewing goji chrysanthemum tea, until 100 hot water into his stomach finally felt less empty. It wasn't until the evening when the sage time had completely passed that Russell returned to 117B, Brick Street. Then he saw Wanda come over with a plate. Careless, forget about it. In order to show that he was a guest from afar, Russell generously divided a large piece of beef into 3 portions and shared the food with the other 2 hardworking witch teachers. He looked out. The 2 of them ate very happily. Their faces were all smiles, but the more they ate, the whiter they were. I don't know why. After eating, Russell took Wanda out shopping to buy new clothes. It's outrageous to say, last night he finally figured out why Wanda was a few centimeters taller. It turned out that at the time of awakening, Wanda subconsciously modified reality to increase her age by 3 years when the magic burst. When Russell asked Wanda to change back, the other party looked embarrassed and said that he didn't know how to do it before. Russell is a little helpless. With the current extent of Wanda, the ability to modify reality is indeed biased to subconsciously burst out when you are emotional. This matter can only be stopped. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, the 2 returned home with a pile of shopping bags. However, Russell was a little surprised after opening the door. Loki, the famous god of trickery, is arguing with an activated teapot and an activated teacup, and looks like he's on the downside. And after seeing Russell return, Loki suddenly rushed over like a savior. Your Excellency Russell, your teapot is a coward because I don't drink its tea, Loki said angrily. Russell blinked, didn't expect his own teapot to be so smart. Even this can be seen, isn't it? Russell made up for it. Loki suddenly blushed, and suddenly said something strange about escaping during the competition, such as strategy, detour, and so on. Russell waved his hand. I believed, so you came to me for something? Only then did Loki remember that he hadn't come to quarrel with a teapot, and immediately said anxiously, "That's right, Lord Russell." Because the last fight hit too much, Thor had to go to Muspelheim after recovering from his injuries, solve the prophesied Ragnarok, and prove himself to the God King. You know, as a brother I was very worried about him and strongly recommended that he not go. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. Seeing that the other party once again showed my letter expression, Loki looked embarrassed. And then? Russell asked again. Loki said a little nervously. And then Thor didn't come back for 5 days. I begged Heimdall to take a look, but unfortunately, the flames of Muspelheim obscured his gaze. Although Russell was a little surprised that Thor had not fought the flame giant, he still spoke. Then why don't you ask your father to come to me? I'm afraid it won't all be a barbecue later. Loki twisted and said, Father went into a divine sleep and couldn't wake up, so I thought that only you, as the world's most powerful mage, could free Thor. Russell nodded, and then in Loki's surprised gaze, beckoned to the activated teapot. Miss Teapot, see off the guests. Saying that, Russell pulled Wanda and walked towards the castle. Loki's smile froze, and the next second his face suddenly turned pale. He took the teapot that was blocking in front of him in his arms and chased after him with an anxious face. Master Russell, Your Excellency, for my sake, take you to the World Tree, help me save Thor. If he doesn't go again, he may really die. Russell stopped and looked at Loki, tilting his head slightly. Are you Asgardians just asking for help? Loki was stunned at first, and then understood and gritted his teeth. If you ask you to mention anything, I will definitely do it. To be honest, he really didn't expect his father to sleep at this time. His original intention was to let Thor get into trouble, and then let Odin save him, and he benefited from it. But now there is an accident. If Thor dies in the land of fire, he knows that Odin will never spare him. Are you sure you're going to do anything? Russell narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. Loki was a little apprehensive, but thinking that he would pay the bill in the future, he immediately focused on it. Of course I'm willing to do anything for Thor's sake. Russell laughed even more, how he couldn't see the little calculations in Loki's heart. But his account is not so easy to lose. Russell nodded, narrowed his eyes slightly, and smiled. Since you said so, I won't seem close to people if I don't go again. But you better pray now that he hasn't been turned into a roast by Soltel. Episode 72. Muspelheim, one of the 9 realms, can also be called the Land of Fire. It's full of killing, chaos, and the blazing heat that never dissipates. There are no pure flesh and blood beings here, mostly monsters born from magma fire, and some undead creatures cursed by flames here. But these monsters have a common monarch. The flame giant Solel rules the entire flame nation, but I prefer it's called Burning Hell. What do you think? On the huge obsidian throne, a humanoid creature with huge horns growing on its head and burning red coal said with a smile. On the opposite side of it, the once radiant Thor god Thor was now haggard, his eyes were bleak, and he was pulled by 4 burning chains and hung in the air on all 4s. The once dazzling golden long hair was burned to only a short inch of charred black, and even Mjolnir was nowhere to be seen. But even so, Thor's mouth was hard. If you don't talk about stinking Mars, I'm still willing to listen to you say 2 words. Seriously, that smells worse than a broken one egg. Soltel's temper was obviously not very good, and he immediately opened his mouth and spewed out a Martian storm to give Thor a bath. Thor burst into lightning in his eyes for a moment, roaring angrily, but in the next second, the flames on the 4 chains swept up, forming a huge fireball that wrapped Thor inside. Until the flames dissipated 10 minutes later, the divine power that Thor had just accumulated was swept away again, and it became even more sluggish. The flame giant mocked maliciously. Gee, are you really Odin's son? How can you be so weak? You wouldn't have picked it up by him, would you? Otherwise, I really can't figure out why he sent you to die. Thor had a wry smile on his face. He didn't expect Solel to be so powerful before he came. In the land of flames, the other party simply has an immortal characteristic, and every time Mjolnir breaks the opponent's body, the other party can always be reborn from the flames. Even, he had a feeling, the other party was deliberately broken by himself, in order to see the shock in his eyes, and then become defeated and desperate little by little. Soltel was very satisfied with Thor's expression at this time and laughed. Thor, if you are a few hundred years later, maybe I will trick you into bringing you back to Asgard. But now that the guidance of fate has not yet arrived, I should not have sent down Ragnarok. You should also be glad that I will not kill you now. I will wait for Odin to redeem him. When Thor had been taken prisoner, he suddenly shouted angrily, You'd better kill me and escape, or the father of the gods will kill you with his own hands. If he was really redeemed, he would rather die. In the face of the threat, Solel just sneered disdainfully, and his nostrils spewed bursts of sparks. If it could kill me completely, that old thing would have been done long ago. As long as the world tree remains, I will be resurrected from the flame realm even if I die. Ragnarok has not yet arrived, I will not die. Hearing such a secret, Thor's brain went blank for a moment, and then he showed an incredible look. Why is this so? Such a life is no longer in line with cosmic common sense. Is there really a so-called destiny? For a while, Thor was confused. On the huge stone pillar tied with chains, Russell, who heard this secret, also frowned at this time. If it is really like the flame giants say, then Ragnarok must still hide unknown secrets. But that's what Odin should worry about. and his main purpose this time is to take Thor. Of course, the land of flames can't come for nothing. Here Thor also eased from the shock at this time, and then looked at the flame giant's eyes at this time. But in the next second, he saw the flame giant's head bang and exploded directly like a firework, leaving only a headless corpse sitting on the throne. I must be dying. Thor blinked his eyes hard, thinking he had seen an illusion. But then a familiar voice came from in front of him. If you want to die, it doesn't matter if I leave, I'm still very reasonable. In the next second, Russell appeared in the air. Sultan excitedly said, "Did my father ask you to come and save me? It's actually your brother." Russell shrugged and didn't look at Thor's reaction, because not far away, the head of the flame giant grew out of his neck like wriggling magma. The head is indeed not a weakness. It seems that the other party in the three thunder gods is indeed suspended animation. In the next second, Russell tried to control the flames in Sultan's head again, but this time the other party only flickered the flames in his eye sockets and did not explode again. Solo slowly stood up, and the twilight sword in his hand turned fiery red and pointed at Russell. "Ignorant, all the flames of Muspelheim belong to the flame giants. You are just a low-level fire controller." Russell didn't speak, just gently waved 2 fingers. Suddenly, 3 magma-like fireballs appeared, spinning each other and shooting towards Sultan. The body of the flame giant more than 5 meters looked huge, but it was very flexible, and he raised the twilight sword and slashed forward. But at the moment when the sword blade touched the already 3-in-1 fireball, a violent orange-red-black flame erupted from the fireball, instantly devouring Sir Tel. In such a scene, Sol, who was hanging in the air, was not happy, but shouted anxiously, "Mage Russell, it is a flame giant. No matter how hot the flame is, it is ineffective." As if as Thor said, there was a burst of laughter in the flames. Solo stepped out of the flames, not caring about the red flames remaining on his body. "Idiot, even the flames that belong to you can't hurt me. You are so naive." Russell shook his head slightly. "Not necessarily in my opinion." Syllable. As Russell snapped his fingers, the red flames that remained on Surtle's body turned dark blue in an instant. "This is a fire." Sir Tel, who was still laughing confidently just now, suddenly roared out in pain. Wherever it was ignited by fierce fire, it melted like magma and flowed towards the ground. Thor was stunned when he saw this scene, and then there was a strong feeling of heart palpitations. Immediately understood that that kind of flame was not something his divine body could resist. The flame giant fell to the ground with a bang. Its legs had melted and ceased to exist at this time, and its upper body was about to step into the footsteps. "What kind of flame is this?" Solo let out a roar. As a flame giant, he can be innately immune to flame damage, but right now, this blue flame is more like a curse, like a tarsal maggot. But it's a pity that it can't hear Russell's answer, and a dark blue fire erupts from its eye sockets and mouth, directly turning into a pool of magma. Seeing this, Thor was immediately pleasantly surprised. "Quick, Master Russell, let's go while he is resurrected." Russell looked surprised. "Why run away? I haven't played enough." He planned to slaughter the other party a few more times to see if he could find the reason for the other party's resurrection. And at this moment, a volcano farther away erupted, and a huge soul broke free from it. In the next second, it threw out its flame giant sword and roared angrily, "You don't know anything about my power. Die, bug." Looking at the flying giant sword, Russell shook his head slightly and said to Soul, "The last one is a miserable death. You must not learn it in the future." The words fell, and he made the false grip posture of Soul summoning Mjolnir. Seeing this scene, Sultan's eyes widened and he had a bad feeling in his heart. Impossible. But at this moment, a huge thunder sounded. Episode 73. Bang! I don't know when ink clouds grew in the sky, and a dazzling thunder fell from the sky and slammed into the hot magma lake. In the next moment, the entire lake trembled violently. A black dot soared into the sky, setting off a magma wave tens of meters high. At this moment, an immortal thunder erupted on Mjolnir, shaking the space, and crashing straight into the flying twilight sword. Clang! Like Hong Zhong De Lu, a violent sound burst out. The sword of flame was knocked into the earth and plunged into the earth, while Mjolnir seemed to be guided and fell into Russell's palm with a buzzing roar. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, as if to prove that Thor was back in place. Thor's eyes widened and he shouted out in disbelief, "This can't be. Why can you summon Mjolnir? This is absolutely impossible. You must know that except for him and Odin, no one else can say summoning, even if they pick it up." At this moment, Thor inexplicably felt that the top of his head became green, and his heart was broken. Is it that he is not good enough, and why does Mjolnir change his mind? Russell turned the Mjolnir up and down, and it felt really good. Then he turned to look at Thor and comforted, "Don't look like your girlfriend ran away with someone else. You have to get used to it. Practice. Habit." Thor almost vomited blood once he couldn't stand it, and he was used to it. "Is it the right that your father gave you?" Thor guessed sullenly. "No, it's your sister." Russell was too lazy to help depressed Era adjust his mentality, holding Mjolnir's hammer and soaring into the sky. Invisible magic power emanates, hooking the power of thunder. In an instant, hundreds of lightning bolts descended from the clouds in the sky, falling on Russell's body and turning into Thor armor, eagle wing helmet, lightning cape. Sir Tel, who had just stepped out of the volcano, looked up. At this moment, it felt that all its vision disappeared, and in its eyes it could only see that small enemy covered in infinite thunder and lightning, carrying the divine power of silence, and falling like Mount Tai. Rumble. The dark red space instantly turned white, and countless bucket-thick arc thunder snakes erupted and spread in all directions from the crater. And the flame giant Soltel has his head shattered, and his body is more like a building that has been blasted, shattering and collapsing layer by layer from top to bottom. Under one blow, the hundreds of meters tall flame giant shattered his bones. Distance. Sol's eyes froze when he saw this scene, and he wanted to shout something, but couldn't speak. He can only roar at himself inside. If you say that you are Thor, then what is in front of you? If it is Thor in front of you, then what is you? The answer seems simple. That's when he left the hammer and nothing. At this moment, Thor suddenly felt as if he was not worthy of that Mjolnir. The glory of his own so-called Thor is all hammer. Russell is right. He is the god of hammers and an inferior tool of Mjolnir. At this moment, the thunder appeared again. I don't know when Russell has come to the sky. Mjolnir presses down, and suddenly, countless thunders fall towards the magma lake below. But this time they did not explode and disappear, but formed a violent thunder hell, suppressing the newly born flame giant. Solo raised his palm, but the moment he touched the thunder hell, his palm exploded and shattered. It wants to summon the flame wyvern, and the fire elemental monster attacks Russell in the sky to help him out of trouble. But before these creatures can arrive, they are constantly destroyed by the falling thunder in the clouds. Thor was silent again, followed by a wry smile. What is this operation again? He hasn't done it for thousands of years, but now Russell just holds the hammer and uses it. However, in the next second, something happened that made Thor feel that his worldview collapsed. Russell's eyes turned into flames in an instant. The power from the spirit of vengeance formed a fiery flame that burned in the hand and quickly spread to Mjolnir. In an instant, this artifact forged by the white dwarf star forge spread out strange flame patterns, spikes bulged from all sides, and evil skeletons were born from the end of the hammer handle. Russell fell straight from the sky with the demonized Mjolnir in his hand, and landed on top of the flame giant's head. In the next second, terrifying hellfire mixed with thunder and lightning erupted from Mjolnir, forming an energy chain with a tip like a spear, like a dragon, constantly penetrating the body of the flame giant. With a burst of screams, flames and thunder chains were wrapped around Surtle's body, while the other end was linked to the demonized Thor and held by Russell himself. As Russell's mind moved, the hell of thunder dissipated. Holding Mjolnir's hammer, he lifted the flame giant that was 300 or 400 meters long out of the magma lake and threw it to the ground. It's useless. It's useless. I will be reborn in the flames again and again until I kill you. Solo roared madly, staring at Russell with a pair of fire eyes, not hiding his deep malice at all. Russell sneered, lowered his height to the flame giant's eye, and the next moment, the Eye of Judgment was launched. In an instant, an extremely terrifying, extremely miserable scream sounded. It was as if there were thousands of sinful souls being tortured and screaming at the same time. The flame giant struggled madly, and his eyes erupted like flames. Such a big reaction made Russell a little shocked. He was actually just experimenting, and according to his ideas, Solo was probably a soulless creature. But at the moment it is clearly not. In the next second, Russell decisively increased the power of the output Eye of Judgment. In the distance, Thor turned pale, and he only saw Russell glaring at the flame giant, who immediately screamed in pain. First he struggled frantically, then he trembled, and finally his body became motionless, and his head tilted. At this moment, Thor almost screamed. He saw the flame giant who was originally just a flame in his eyes, and at this time, a solid ball like a coal ball burning appeared in his eye socket, inexplicably seeping people. Russell retreated the power of the spirit of vengeance at this time, and the thunder flame chain suddenly dissipated, and Mjolnir also changed back to his original form. At this time, the flame giant also collapsed and turned into ashes as if the interior was burned empty. Is it really dead this time, not resurrected? Thor showed a look of joy, so Ragnarok is not invincible. But before he could rejoice for 3 seconds, he saw Russell frowning and looking into the distance. The next moment, the terrifying roar of the earth's crust cracking sounded. A palm with a foot of 70 or 80 meters broke through the rocky earth. I seem to know why my father didn't kill him, Thor muttered to himself. He saw it, as if every real death would make the other party stronger again. Rumble. The volcano collapsed, the earth tore apart, and a flame giant with 1,000 meters stood up. But the next second, it roared. Who are you waiting for? Who is trespassing into my flame realm? Go and die. Bugger. Russell was stunned for a moment. However, at this time, countless terrifying flames were summoned from everywhere by the flame giants, turning into monstrous flames and descending. The clouds were evaporated in an instant, and at this moment, this place really turned into a world of flames. Seeing this scene, Russell wanted to turn around and take Thor away. Since he had discovered the reason for the resurgence of the flame giant, there was no need to continue fighting. But at this moment, in the face of the real sea of fire, the pure blood in his body that had never found any use from the Holy Lord reward, became stupid at this moment. P.S. The real Ragnarok written in this article is the Shadow Ancient God in the comics, and I give a big word to those who don't know. Episode 74. Russell felt that there was nothing to hesitate about. Since the pure blood from the Holy Lord is about to move, then you must try it, otherwise this reward will not be blind. What's more, the sea of fire in front of him was not life-threatening. Russell quickly flew to Thor's side with a flick of his fingers, and suddenly a star-like veil was completely draped over the other party. This is a quantum defense magic that he has not used for a long time, and it can completely help Thor resist the fire damage. The next moment, Russell was facing the sea of fire against the sea of fire with Thor's shocked gaze. As soon as he entered the sea of fire, Russell's body surface suddenly glowed with ice-blue fluorescence, and the frost magic was instinctively used by him to resist the flames. But Russell immediately discovered that the Holy Lord's blood was thirsting for flames and wanted him to withdraw his defenses. Just thinking for a second, Russell made a decision. He decided to give up magical defense altogether. With the power of controlling flames, coupled with the power of dog charms with extremely powerful healing powers, he believes that even accidents can be made up. And the situation is not right. He can also phantom and move away in an instant. In the next second, he directly ripped off the frost magic on his body. In an instant, the hot temperature hit, making Russell feel a sharp pain in his skin. But it was only for a moment, and the flames no longer harmed him. I don't know when a hook-like dragon-shaped totem appeared on his forehead, and it was shining slightly at this time. And those flames that originally belonged to Soltel were like flowing water, madly absorbed into the totem. Seeing this, Russell completely gave up the flame manipulation to weaken the resistance, and suddenly the flames tumbled, forming a huge vortex, and rushing towards the totem even faster. Beyond the sea of fire, the flame giant Solol also seemed to notice something strange. The next moment, it snorted coldly, and with a finger of the huge twilight sword, suddenly the sea of fire began to surge and began to shrink sharply inside. More than 10 seconds later, Thor was stunned to look at the huge fireball that almost covered half of the sky. Maybe it shouldn't be a fireball, it's more like a round of the sun being condensed. The terrifying heat distorts the surrounding space. At this time, he could no longer imagine what terrifying high pressure and temperature Russell had endured inside, and could only silently pray that the other party was okay. But what Thor didn't know was that even inside such a fireball, Russell was still unharmed. Not even a hair is bent. At this time, he just felt as if he was pressed into a high-temperature jelly, and although it was difficult to move, the dragon totem on his forehead was still frantically absorbing the already ionic flame. As time passed, Russell slowly felt that his body began to feel like it was being stretched up. He sensed the limit, but it was at this extreme moment that Russell's heart once again had the feeling of using the Patronus charm to create angel armor when he killed the Black Heart demon. It is a premonition in the underworld, a blessing in the soul, and an instinctive consciousness trigger. Without any thought to think, Russell subconsciously runs magic to release magic. The next moment, the ultimate skill from the Harry Potter World Transfiguration charm was triggered. Its name is Animagus. At this moment, the power in the totem burst out. Russell felt a deafening roar in his ears, mixed with roars that seemed to come from ancient times. Then darkness came. Russell suddenly found that he couldn't see anything, only felt as if his mind had entered the empty universe. Everything was fine now, bigger, but it seemed to shrink again. In an instant, it seemed like another 10,000 years. Just when he felt like he was going crazy, two flames lit up in the darkness. No, that's not a flame. It was a pair of huge golden vertical pupils, and there seemed to be flames circulating inside. Roar! A dragon groan exploded, and the dark space was instantly shattered. Thor looked up at the sky weakly, his eyes full of tears of regret and despair. He felt that Russell had died in the sun in the sky, and there would not even be a trace of ashes left, and himself is a murderer. If it is not that you cannot stand your self-esteem after being defeated, if you do not want to prove yourself, if you are not arrogant, you will not do any preparation, then there would be no today, and Russell would not have died to save himself. At this moment, Thor allowed his eyes to be stung by the light, and said to himself in pain, "Father of the gods, I don't deserve the glory you bestowed on Asgard, I don't deserve to take Mjolnir, and I don't deserve to enter Valhalla after death. I just hope you can forgive." Roar! At this moment, a dragon groan that seemed to be able to shatter space sounded. At this moment, Thor's brain became blank, and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. Liar! He saw a huge obsidian-colored head sticking out of the sun, a pair of golden vertical pupils flowing with flames as if sacred and inviolable, exuding terrifying majesty. With another dragon groan, a behemoth about 10,000 meters long, with huge scales, wrapped around the roaring flames, shattered the sun and broke free. There is a fire rain in the sky, and above the fire rain is a terrifying existence that occupies almost half of the sky. The shocking visual impact is beyond words at this moment. At this moment, without any association, a word instinctively appeared in Thor's heart. Dragon. This is the real dragon, only the legendary existence. Above the sky, Russell felt so wonderful. The vision, senses, and magic are all different. He never thought that his animagus was a magical creature. Of course, all this comes from the mutation of the pure blood of the Holy Lord, coupled with the unique sea of fire offered by the flame giant. Otherwise, he won't be finished. And Russell has a feeling that his current body size is not the limit, and he will grow as he grows. Thinking like this, Russell's terrifying eyes looked at Sir Tel, who seemed to be shocked in the distance. It's time to thank each other. In the next second, he rolled up the violent air flow, cut through the flame wave that struck again, and held the opponent's head with one claw. "It's as easy as catching a sheep. Monster, let me go." The flame giant roared, wanting to swing the twilight sword in his hand, but before he could use his strength, his arm fell weakly. With just a hard buckle, the dragon's claws crushed the flame giant's head, then easily killed the other party twice, and Russell stopped experimenting. The mana consumed in this form is too terrifying, even he can't last long. However, the defense and attack power brought by it are also outrageously strong, not to mention the abilities of other dragons themselves. This time it's a big profit. The next moment, Russell changed back to human form and came to Thor, who had been completely stunned. He grabbed the other party's collar, and with the movement of his thoughts, a colorful torrent suddenly burst out towards the deep space of the universe. Episode 75. Asgard. On the Rainbow Bridge, a seven-colored energy stream descended from the deep space of the universe. The statue-like Heimdall suddenly opened his golden eyes, his eyes full of surprise. This is his first time seeing the Rainbow Bridge teleportation beyond Asgard. In the next second, he saw that the eldest prince of the Immortal Palace was dragged out of it, looking very miserable. Heimdall probably understood what was going on, as Loki had begged him to find Thor. However, he was shocked to see that Russell could easily bring Thor back from the flame zone. As a warrior who once fought with Odin in the Nine Realms, he knows some secrets. Flame giants are resurrected after death and continue to grow stronger, which is very difficult. Of course, after a period of time, the opponent's strength will return from the respawn state to the normal level. Otherwise, Sir Tel would not have been invincible in the universe by committing suicide all the time. Heimdall walked over a few steps and said very solemnly and politely, "Master Russell, please wait a moment. I need to go to summon Lord Divine Queen first." Russell nodded in understanding. Odin sleeps. At this point in time, outsiders entering directly will cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Or wait a minute. This was also the reason why he positioned the teleportation at the head of the bridge, not at the gate of the Immortal Palace. Soon Russell saw the Queen of Gods, and Frigga rushed over with a group of goddesses. "Mother." Thor lowered his head and spoke with a defeated expression, not daring to look at Frigga's disappointed expression. Looking at her son's tragic situation, a trace of distress appeared in Frigga's eyes, but she was immediately hidden in the depths. But at this time, she must be ruthless. Frigga did not open her mouth to Thor, but nodded gratefully to Russell. "Thanks to Master Russell, my immature son was able to return alive, and this kindness will be remembered throughout Asgard." Russell smiled. "The Queen of God is too polite. It's just a small matter. You don't have to pay so much attention to it." Frigga shook her head. "Master Russell thinks so, but as a mother I can't. And then the God King will send someone to send a thank you gift when he wakes up." Then, without waiting for Russell to refuse, Frigga continued. "And there is one more thing that needs to trouble Master Russell. My eldest son almost ran into a catastrophe. I hope you can take care of it for a while. During this period, I will deprive him of his divine power and make him an ordinary person. When you feel that the time is right, just give him Mjolnir." Hearing this, Thor suddenly raised his head, his eyes full of shock and anxiety. "Mother, I really know it's wrong. Please don't do this." Fated by God, he couldn't imagine how miserable that day would be. But Frigga didn't look at him, just looked at Russell with inquiring and expectant eyes. Russell pondered for a few seconds before nodding. "Since you are deprived of divine power, there is no problem in bringing it back." Frigga saw Russell agree, thanked her again, and then looked at Thor with a serious face. In the next second, the eternal spear from Odin appeared in his hand. Frigga shook the ground with both guns in her hands, and suddenly a golden lightning bolt with Odin's aura appeared above and hit Thor. In an instant, the scale armor on Thor's armor peeled off and disappeared piece by piece, and Thor's breath suddenly became disordered and became heavy. At this moment, Thor was no different from a strong ordinary human. Then Frigga seemed to be afraid that Russell would be polite to Thor, and said directly, "Mage Russell has full power to dispose of it and let it go. Don't worry about his princely status, as long as he is still alive and takes a breath." Russell could see that Frigga was really angry this time, so he nodded. Then he did not rest in the Immortal Palace, and directly returned to Shield with Soul, who had lost the meaning of living. Nick Fury was still at Stonehenge when there was no one in the office. Russell let go and threw Thor on the ground, and the latter came directly to lie flat and fight. Thor didn't mention the hammer thing. The fact that the other party was more like Thor than him a few hours ago hit him too hard, making him a little unacceptable. Like an abandoned child, he held back his grievances and said with a stubborn face, "Are you going to throw me in a dungeon to fight a death row prisoner? Or do you want to leave me on a whaling ship as a coolie?" Russell shook his head. "Neither." Thor was a little surprised. "Didn't you like to do this 800 years ago? I've seen a few shows. Especially the duel, although a little bloody, but it is really good looking." Russell showed a malicious smile. "Compared to 800 years ago, I have a better choice here. What are you going to do?" Thor immediately stood up and retreated into the corner, looking at Russell with a wary expression. Russell showed 2 rows of sunran white teeth, slowly stood up and approached Thor, and laughed like a villain in his mouth. "Hee hee, don't you like to talk about glory the most? I'll make you cool this time." Thor was frightened by the laughter, and suddenly felt creepy, and ran to the door in a few steps and wanted to push the door to escape. Fools stay here, but it's a pity that he can't open the door no matter how he screws. Until he pulled the doorknob down, he could only lean his back against the door panel and widen his eyes as he watched Russell slowly approaching with a look of horror and weakness. Don't come here, don't. Woof, Wong. Natasha habitually stepped out of the elevator and walked towards the chief's office. She had just received an order for Russell to go up and have a new mission for her. Pushing open the door, Natasha was visibly stunned. She saw a small yellow-haired Shiba Inu squatting on her desk, her eyes full of humane tears, and it fell down. And there is also a strange circle around the neck that I don't know what kind of instrument it is. And there are 2 buttons on it, one red and one green. Director, I didn't expect you to like to have dogs. It looks very cute. Natasha slapped a horse fart without making a trace, looking forward to the day when she can turn into a cat. But in the next second, she saw the dog looking towards her, with a very obvious and strong anger in her eyes. It was as if stimulated by her words. The move after the forehead was even more unexpected to her. She actually saw the half-squatting Shiba Inu raise his left forepaw and press a red button on the right side of the collar in reverse. Suddenly, a stick-reading male voice sounded from inside the collar. I'm Thor. I'm Thor. I am Thor. In the next second, the puppy's head raised, his eyes became proud, and he watched with contempt as Natasha paused pressed the green button. For the glory of the gods of the north, episode 76. Syllable. Russell came on Soul's dog's head. The latter immediately glared back angrily. The dog's paw pulled out the afterimage at this moment, and the green key was pressed straight to Mars. Anyway, the can is broken, since the other party has turned himself into a dog. He is afraid of what he will do. Snap. I am X99. I'm Thor. Russell sneered and said disdainfully, if you press me again, I will turn you into a female dog. The threat was very effective, and Thor petrified in place at once, his claws stiff and did not dare to press again. He is sure that the other party will definitely do what he says. It's already miserable to turn into a dog, and if he becomes a mother again, he won't go back to Asgard, and he will die directly. However, for the last trace of stubbornness, he still carefully pressed the red button. For the glory of the gods of the north, there is a beginning and an end, and it must end in glory. Natasha looked strange. She could see that this Shiba Inu must have been turned into a dog by the chief, but it was a little strange to wear a collar. But a little envious. After changing cats a few times, she was a little addicted to this, but unfortunately she wouldn't. Russell seemed to know what Natasha was thinking, and said with a smile, I'm going to let you take him on a mission in cat form. Hell's Kitchen has been a bit messy recently, and the hand union seems to have changed owners. You guys go and investigate. Natasha was suddenly pleasantly surprised. She can change into a cat again. And the investigation task, it is clear that the animal has more advantages. No problem, Chief. Natasha straightened her chest and said very seriously, the subordinate promises to complete the task. The investigation is not clear. I will not come back to see you. Sultan glared. What kind of stuff? Don't come back after the investigation? How did he feel that the other party did not seem to plan to finish the work in a short time? But don't be afraid, it's just a cat. Don't be picked up by yourself. He wanted to press the green button, but didn't dare. At this time, Russell raised his hand and pointed out, and turned Natasha into a white cat again. Then he took out a rather handsome collar from the space ring, which also had 2 bell-shaped buttons on it. The cat Tasha said strangely at this time, Director, I found that I can talk this time without bringing this thing. Russell explains, the mission is still dangerous, and the cat's physique cannot be compared with your original, so I made a magic collar. This green one is a magic shield, and the red one will fire ice spears. You use it carefully, the mana stored in it is only enough to use it 100 times. When he was still thinking about how to threaten Natasha Sultan, he was anxious, and Wong called out, Wong, unfair, woof. I'm going to speak too. Woo. Russell ignored Soul and put a beautiful collar on Natasha herself, and said, well, before going to Hell's Kitchen, you can properly temper your subordinates. Otherwise, he won't be in peace. Russell said and retreated to the corner to make room for the cat and dog battle. Tasha the cat nodded and squinted at the stupid dog on the table with a silly face. The next moment, 3 sharp claws popped out of the pink meat pad. I will be afraid of you. Thor looked condescending, and the dog's paw pressed heavily on the button. I'm Thor, for the glory of the gods of the north. Wong. Thor pounced fiercely. And then, Wong. Whoosh. Whoosh. What? Listening to the sound of this puppy being violently beaten, Russell was somewhat unbearable, and could not bear to continue to watch Thor lose the dog with his own eyes. So he silently took out his mobile phone and turned on the recording function. After all, looking through the screen is not considered to be seeing it with your own eyes. Very witty. Hell's Kitchen. Inside the hand meeting, Mrs. Gao bowed her head and knelt on the ground, not daring to raise her head. And in her original seat, a ninja wearing a deer antler helmet. The turtles are sitting on it. Loki didn't even dare to look at what his face looked like at this moment. Now he has only one mission, that is, defeat Thor, who has turned into a dog and he can transform back. However, at this time, his magic power was sealed, and the two knives behind his back could be used. As for resisting Russell, he felt that it was better to forget it. The old woman in front of her lost her mind after being glanced at by the other party, which was too scary. After a few brief explanations, Russell left S.H.I.E.L.D. directly. The script has already been arranged, and he doesn't care about the rest. Of course, since he promised to discipline Thor for a period of time, this is only the first step, and he has follow-up plans. As for Loki, it was his own idea. He hasn't forgotten the time mutation authority, so at least he has to raise Loki's strength to execute the plan, and the time controller is still in his hands. It was still early and there was no need for dinner, so Russell boldly went home. However, when he opened the door, he saw that Wanda, under the instruction of two witches, was brewing a green potion, bubbling and bubbling. This doesn't look like making Powerpuff Girls. Russell's face changed, and he decisively fled and ran next door to play with Tony as a tuba figure. If nothing else, flying by yourself and flying in a battle armor are really two feelings. The rest of the day suddenly calmed down, and Russell practiced magic during the day and went to Tony at night. He tries to put Jarvis' intelligent program inside a puppet and then tries to activate it with the magic that activates life. I didn't expect it to really succeed. Jarvis has the ability to network analytical data while having emotions. Finally, before leaving, Russell asks Tony to help him make a female intelligence program for himself. His castle still lacked a housekeeper, and he couldn't eat dinner out all the time. At the same time, during this period, he increased Metavan's simulation level to 63% through the exchange point. In addition to mana and magical knowledge, get dozens of spells again: Arcane Missile, Ice Barrier, Awakening, Arcane Enhancement, Arcane Wisdom, Spell Enhancement, Curse Lifting, Flashing, Detection Magic, Sheep Transformation. Wait a minute. Among them, Russell's biggest surprise is the Ice Barrier. This skill is immune to damage for 10 seconds, belongs to a super life-saving skill, and even has a taste of rules. And there is another one that is also very good: Sheep Transformation. It sounds like Transfiguration, but it's more advanced, because if the enemy is strong, his transfiguration will basically not succeed. But unlike the Sheep Transformation technique, this spell can forcibly turn the enemy into a sheep. The exact timeliness is uncertain. If the enemy is weak, then it may last for several days. But if the enemy is strong, it is likely to be a few seconds, or milliseconds. But even this is a divine skill. Late at night, even Karmatage had only a few candles left to flicker in the hall. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew into the library. Early the next morning, a scream sounded, and soon all the mages got the news that the librarian Kamaz had been killed. Episode 77, Karmatage Library. By this time, the body of the administrator had already been carried away, and there was not a trace of blood left on the mottled stone tiles. Russell went straight to the depths and opened a magic book inlaid with yellow energy crystals. Sure enough, the page that recorded how to communicate Dormammu spells had been torn off. I didn't expect Kaecilius to come to this far so early. Russell sighed slightly, not knowing how Gui would solve this matter. After all, now that the timeline is ahead, Strange is still working as an attending surgeon in the hospital. He guessed that the other party might let himself capture Kaecilius. Until Karmatage waited until noon, Wang Tigu sent a message. But the content is not what Russell thinks, and Gui's request is for him to protect Karmatage. In a remote church, the statue of Jesus stared at the blood on the ground, which inexplicably looked a little terrifying. At this time, layers of whispers began to echo, and the blood on the ground was suddenly swept away by invisible forces. Kaecilius uses his magic power to carve the mark of the Lord of the Dark Dimension in midair, and at this time, the mages standing on the left and right of him began to chant solemnly. In the name of Ru, see Ru's body, find my place, the power of Shanru, Ruji's true face is what I want, Lord of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu. In an instant, it was as if there was an invisible key to pry open the blockable dimension. The patterned floor tiles on the ground change and unfold layer by layer, and the space is distorted. At this moment, the vision of the 5 people who were summoning Dormammu changed in an instant. There is no church in their eyes, but only an incomparably terrifying dark figure and those terrifying purple eyes. After being looked at by these eyes, several people's eyes appeared around them that were corroded by darkness. At the same time, an extremely huge force was also born invisibly, filling everyone's body, as if a grand and shocking voice from afar also sounded in the hearts of everyone. Kill Gui and destroy the supreme sanctuary barrier. After that, I will let you enjoy the dark world forever, immortal and immortal. 5 people knelt down at the same time and lowered their heads. Obey the master's order, I will kill Gui later. At this moment, feeling the seemingly endless magic in his body, Kaecilius was very confident. How can a thief be as strong as he has been given by his master? And it's not just the ancient one. That Russell will also die at his own hands this time. At midnight, after all the other betrayers have absorbed the power of the dark dimension, Kaecilius couldn't wait to open the portal with a group of dark believers and walked in. You really came. Inside the New York sanctuary, Gui stood quietly at the entrance of the stairs alone, seemingly not surprised by the scene in front of him. Kaecilius did not panic in the slightest and sneered. I didn't expect to destroy the first London temple and meet you, liar. Do you know how confused and desperate I used to be? I see you as a mentor, but you turn out to be a thief, enjoying the dark power alone. Gui shook his head slightly. You don't know the true face of Dormammu. His eternal life is actually endless torture. Now I can give you one last chance. When he said the last sentence, Gui's tone was slightly strange, as if there was some self-blame and some indescribable sincerity. But these words were extremely harsh in Kaecilius' ears, and he said with a fierce face, "It's a pity that I won't give you one last chance, Lord of Darkness, your life." When the words fell, he turned his palms together, and a transparent blade appeared in his hand. The next moment, he personally took the lead and rushed over. Fiorucci sighed, the last trace of pity in his eyes absent. She raised her hand and waved, and suddenly the sound of the mirror cracking sounded. And then the entire New York sanctuary began to disintegrate, swim, and transform. Looking at the distance between the two sides that kept widening, Kaecilius sneered, "Mirror space? Maybe yesterday I would only run for my life, but you are not the only one in control this time." When the words fell, he stretched out his arms and then suddenly pulled himself, and suddenly countless roaring sounds sounded. The surrounding walls, floor tiles, and stairs all twisted inward, and finally turned into a small gladiatorial arena with a radius of less than 10 meters. Up, kill her. The distance was brought closer again, and more than a dozen dark disciples took out different weapons at the same time and charged towards Gui. Gui looked indifferent, swung his hands downward, and suddenly, the 2 rings of Ragdoll condensed in the upper hand. It's a defensible spell. In the next second, Gui rushed head-on. Although she looks thin, she looks like a tiger into the flock. Everywhere they passed, those dark believers who were even strengthened were not the sum of the blows at all, and fell one by one. But just after she defeated another dark believer, the next one jumped up and pounced. Gui calmly attacked, raising his hand to accurately hit the opponent's weak point. But it was at this moment that a transparent blade penetrated the body of the dark believer in front of her and pierced her abdomen. Fiorucci did not panic, and in an instant, the spirit body came out, and a new magic attack appeared in his hands to sneak up on Kaecilius. However, seeing such a scene, Kaecilius showed a sinister smile of triumph. "Just waiting for you." In an instant, the bodies of all the dark believers except him exploded. One after another, pitch-black mist rolled out, forming black chains in the blink of an eye and tightly entangled Gui. In the next second, Kaecilius did not hesitate to start portraying the marks of the dark dimension. As the final call was completed, the space first trembled violently, and then the sound of shattering sounded. "The space is shattered." I saw pieces of space the size of fingernails spilled out, revealing a black hole, the size of a fist, and inside the void is the dark dimension. At this moment, Dormammu's voice full of joy and impatience came from inside. "Gui, you thief, this time it finally fell into my hands. I will transform you into the best slave." In an instant, a black power like tentacles quickly entangled Gui, who was still struggling, and then violently dragged back. Gui did not sit still, his body emitted a strong golden light, and suddenly the black power began to dissolve. However, due to the continuous flow of dark energy, the two sides fell into a stalemate for a while, forming a tug-of-war. But there is still one more person who can move at this moment. Go and die. Ancient One. Kaecilius smiled viciously and slammed the blade in his hand through Gui's heart. Blood splattered, the body died, and Gui's spirit body instantly dimmed, and he was dragged into the dark dimension without resistance. And at this time, that space hole was also quickly repaired. At this moment, in the entire mirror space, there was no other life except Kaecilius after laughing maniacally. But outside the mirror space, a witch is watching everything that happens inside with dark eyes. When she saw the moment when the ancient spirit body was swallowed by the dark dimension, she also revealed an excited and terrifying crazy smile. Episode 78. Dormammu, if I take back the words of 30,000 years ago, you are still much stronger than a fool, Luna. No, the Sidhorn doppelganger laughed wildly at this moment. Just now, when he felt the rupture of the dimension, he teleported from Greenwich Village, but he didn't expect to see a big drama. Supreme Mage Gui's spirit body didn't know why. It was actually controlled by Dormammu. What's even more ridiculous is that in the end, an ant-like existence decided the victory. That's great news. If it weren't for the fear of accidents, he would have gone in just now. However, enough for now. The 4 monsters in the Dark Temple of the Snow Mountain are the last shred of power he has stored on Earth, so that when something unexpected happens to Wanda that he has marked, he will come as a doppelganger. This requires careful not to use too much power. Otherwise, once he is targeted by Gui, then all his plans will be ruined. But don't worry too much now. As soon as Gu died, the news of Odin's sleep spread throughout the galaxy. Now apart from that human named Russell, there seems to be no more existence on Earth that can threaten him. Of course, what he fears most is not Russell, but the time gem. But he continued to wait. Gui was captured by Dormammu, and the latter would definitely not let the Earth go. Now all he has to do is fish in troubled waters. However, when he obtains the Scarlet Witch, it is not certain who will die in this world. So, Dormammu, you idiot only deserves to be my wedding dress. After laughing compassionately, Sidhorn turned into a scarlet mist and disappeared in place. Karmatage. At this time, there was chaos up and down, the mages were panicking, and only Master Hammer was barely maintaining order. In the highest hall, Russell looked at the ancient corpse in front of him and was puzzled. Can Kaecilius kill the supreme mage? Are you kidding? That kind of weak chicken, don't say gooey, is that he can be slaughtered with one finger. However, according to his perception, this was indeed Guyi's corpse in front of him. His heart was a little heavy, but more incomprehensible. Is Guyi's death the end of an absolute point in time, or is there something else? And at this moment, Wang ran up panting. He didn't have time to mourn Guyi at all, and gasped anxiously, "Quick, come with me to Xianjiang. Now there is only one supreme sanctuary left unbreached. If it is also destroyed and the Earth's barrier disappears, it will be too late for everything." So fast? Russell immediately got up. However, he did not go directly, but went to the temple and took down the Eye of Agamotto. If it was too late, then he had to go and talk to Dormammu about conditions as well. But he won't do it until a certain point. Strange didn't know how many tens of thousands of times he died. That kind of experience would definitely go crazy on ordinary people. Even he won't feel better. Hong Kong. Russell and Wang arrived at the scene, and he was relieved that the Supreme Sanctuary had not been destroyed. The stationed mages are fighting Kaecilius and 4 other dark believers in the streets. Seeing reinforcements, Kaecilius reached out and slapped the ground. Suddenly, the space folds on the ground that formed like waves of the sea, and the mages who were besieging him around him all flew out upside down in an instant. It can be seen that just now, he was just teasing the people around him. Kaecilius stood up and sneered with his head held high. "King, just now you escaped with your life, and now you dare to return it. I really don't know whether you are dead or alive, but for your sake, I can spare your life." After saying this, Kaecilius stared at Russell deadly, with an excited smile full of malice on her face. "Guyi died. I thought you would escape, but I didn't expect to really wait for you." The reason why he didn't destroy the New York sanctuary so quickly was to wait for Russell to come to the rescue. He is waiting for this moment. As for why? Because he was jealous that the other party could watch any magic book at will as soon as he came to Carmitage. But for more than 20 years, he still doesn't even let me read a profound book. It was also because he was jealous that the other party could secretly absorb the dark dimensional energy with Guyi, and he could only risk his life to believe in the other party. If he doesn't kill Russell, he really won't be willing. Russell could certainly see the jealousy in Kaecilius' eyes, but so what? He didn't even bother to talk nonsense with each other. Russell raised his hand to stop the angry king, and there was no expression on his face. "Just watch, let me come alone." Wang hesitated, but looking at Russell's face, he felt that Feng Su was like a volcano about to erupt. Wang took a step back, but still reminded, "Be careful, Kaecilius has absorbed the dark energy now. You must not force it." Russell nodded and walked slowly towards Kaecilius. Seeing this, Kaecilius sneered. He raised his hand to signal the mage behind him not to make a move, and a person with a shadow blade in his hand rushed towards Russell. Die. In the moment of approach, Kaecilius jumped high and stabbed hard with both hands. Not far away, seeing that Russell did not do anything to defend, Wang's face suddenly changed. But at this time, he simply could not step forward to resist. There was excitement in Kaecilius' eyes. He didn't expect the other party to be such an idiot. The next moment, the shadow blade fell rapidly. Bang! As if some light flickered for a moment, Kaecilius instantly flew upside down. What happened? At this moment, not only Kaecilius, who fell to the ground, looked confused, but even the mages who were staring around did not understand what had just happened. "Pretend to be a ghost." Kaecilius shouted angrily and rushed over again, but this time he was very scheming. He did not continue to rush over at the moment when he was about to approach, but threw the shadow blade in his hand. At the same time, another spell is used between the hands. Bang! The shadow blade was shattered, and a rope made of spells appeared in Kaecilius' hand and wrapped around Russell. In an instant, the flames rose, and the winding spell ropes turned into energy embers and dissipated. This time everyone saw what was happening. A burning flame enchantment appeared around Russell's body. The distant king was also stunned. He was also the first time he saw this kind of spell. Russell was still expressionless as he walked towards Kaecilius, but this time he spoke. Russell asked in a calm voice, "Flee, why not escape?" Hearing this, Kaecilius felt anger instantly burn from his heart. He roared angrily, and dark power appeared in his hands, turning into energy balls and blasting towards Russell. But this can easily kill other mages' magic balls, only to explode and dissipate in the flame enchantment, leaving not even a trace behind. Impossible. Kaecilius clasped his hands together and slammed into the earth, and suddenly, the ground bulged to form a substantial spatial fold wave, and flooded Russell. But the next second an exaggerated scene appeared. It was not the flame enchantment that took effect, but the tumbling ground wave automatically parted to the sides the moment it was about to touch Russell. Such a scene was unacceptable to Kaecilius, because the scene in front of him represented the other party's spatial attainment, which was even higher than after he obtained the dark power enhancement. This also means that Guyi does not give him privileges and power. There is only one reason, that is, he is a waste in the eyes of the other party. At this moment, Kaecilius was so angry that he was almost mad. He was able to change his strategy in an instant and rush towards the supreme sanctuary in the rear with the other 4 dark believers. No matter how powerful it is, when the great Dormammu comes, it will be just a large ant. At that time, he can completely pray to Dormammu to torture the other party by himself. Russell didn't chase and didn't use spell attacks. Instead, in the shocked gazes of the other mages behind him, he raised his palm and hooked his 5 fingers, and twisted it hard in the air. The next moment, everyone felt a strong sense of spatial dizziness, and their bodies couldn't help but shake and almost fall. No, more likely the earth shook a little, because when they looked up again, they were shocked by the scene in front of them and their scalps were numb. I saw that the 5 people who had just rushed towards the supreme sanctuary had already appeared in the opposite rear, while they had originally appeared at the door of the supreme sanctuary. This is B. Space displacement, and it's not in mirror space? Fake. How could anyone do it? The mages in front of the supreme sanctuary looked at the back of the figure who was still walking slowly. At this moment, there was only shock in their eyes. Impossible. Kaecilius' eyes were full of fear, and the other 4 dark believers were not much better, silently switching their space. It's simply terrifying. At this moment, there was almost no hesitation, and the 5 people fled in 5 different directions. Nothing can be done. The strength of the enemy is not something they can fight. You must go back and ask Dormammu for more dark energy. But at this moment, Russell's voice came from behind them. Yes, it's right to escape, otherwise how can I make you desperate? In the next second, Russell gently raised his arm. I don't know when, the magic wand that appeared in my hand instantly shot out 5 red rays, hitting 5 people in the blink of an eye. His strength is well controlled. The 5 people just had their backs blown up and fell to the ground, but they could get up immediately and continue to escape. But at this moment, 5 smashing spells shot out again. This time it wasn't so lucky, and all 4 except Kaecilius had their legs blown off. Russell gently raised his hand, and suddenly, the suspension rings of the 4 people automatically flew up and fell into his hands. Only then did he look at Kaecilius, who was running and trying to open the portal, and showed a chilly smile. Drill the core. Shaved bones. The green spell almost instantly crossed a distance of tens of meters and hit the opponent's body accurately. The next moment, a miserable scream sounded. Episode 79. Drill the bones. As one of the 3 unforgivable beings, the caster will feel a bone-piercing crushing sensation throughout the body, as well as a heart-pounding pain that does not want to be borne. Some people who are not firm in their minds can even become idiots once they are cursed. Again, this is a spell that requires intense torturing of other people's minds to learn. It was in much of Dumbledore's magical knowledge, which Russell had never thought of learning. But for now, he thinks maybe it's good to learn. Some people deserve to be tortured by this spell. In front of the supreme sanctuary, all the temple mages showed incomprehensible expressions. They obviously didn't see any damage, but they saw that Kaecilius couldn't continue to open the portal and fell to the ground. And at this time, the other party's body is like a live shrimp thrown on land, constantly rolling, constantly hunched. His face twisted and he let out a miserable scream. It's like being in some unbearable pain. The miserable wailing sound made them feel terrified. At this moment, except for the more familiar king, everyone else involuntarily showed a look of awe. However, Russell did not continue to release the spell, but deliberately walked slowly with the sound of stepping footsteps. The 4 dark believers with broken legs suddenly became even more frightened, wailing while desperately crawling in the local area. If you want to stay away from me so much, then I will give you a free ride. Russell gently raised his hand. Suddenly, all 4 of them floated. In the next second, the 5 fingers of his palm, which were clenched into fists, opened vigorously, and suddenly 4 black image cannonballs flew out like hundreds of meters, hitting different obstacles, exploding a cloud of blood mist. The king standing in front of the supreme sanctuary knew why Russell was so angry, and did not feel that there was anything excessive in front of him. Kill the supreme mage, communicate the dark dimension, and betray the earth. He felt that it was too cheap for this group of people to die like this. Wong looked coldly at Kaecilius, who was still screaming bitterly on the ground, and a look of joy appeared in his eyes. Russell slowly walked to Kaecilius, and then waited quietly. It wasn't until 10 minutes later that Kaecilius stopped screaming. At this time, his body was already soaked with sweat, and the epidermis of his body was twitching slightly. Russell looked down at the other party's fearful eyes, and an icy smile appeared at the corner of his mouth again. Drill the heart and cut the bone. The terrible pain just came again. Kaecilius kept rolling, and roared unwillingly in his mouth. What the hell are you? How can a secret mage have this kind of magic? Gooey. It was Gooey who taught it to you alone, I know. Russell gave only one answer. Curse. A burst of green light appeared, and Kaecilius kept passing out from the pain, and then woke up stimulated by the severe pain. Until the end, he felt that his spirit body had been shattered, his brain could no longer think, and there was only pain left in the world of perception and nothing else. At this moment, an icy voice came. With such waste as you, how did you kill the supreme mage? Russell looked at Kaecilius, who was no longer human, and asked, waiting for the other party's answer. The next moment, Kaecilius's eyes did not shine, and instinctively replied, "Yes, it was Dormammu who gave me the method to break the dimension on this side of the earth for a short time, and it was the Ancient One he killed." Hearing the answer, Russell looked at Kaecilius, who was like mud under his feet, in silence, and after a few seconds, raised his wand and aimed it at the other party's head. Kaecilius' eyes regained some consciousness and looked at Russell in horror. At this moment, he felt a strong killing intent, and his soul was trembling. In an instant, what jealousy, what anger, what unwillingness all disappeared. At this moment, there was only fear left in his heart, and instinctively begged for mercy. "Don't kill me, I can give you black." Adavaso. Russell coldly recited the spell of death. Green thunder burst out from the tip of the wand in an instant, devouring the opponent's life and annihilating his soul after illuminating Kaecilius' terrified pupils. At this moment, the temple mages in the audience were silent. They went from initial anger, to exhaustion, to despair, and when Russell appeared, everything turned around in an instant. They see all the dark believers dying in despair and fear, not even the mighty Kaecilius, but a larger ant. Everyone looked fixedly at the silent back in the distance, and understood what this meant. There is no second candidate for the supremacy of Karmatage, but right now, everyone saw Russell turn his head sharply, and a surprised expression appeared on his face, and he suddenly reached out and shook his hand. Suddenly, the mirror space expanded wildly with Russell as the starting point, and quickly wrapped towards the supreme sanctuary. Rumble. The unknown furious red energy suddenly appeared, resisting the advance of the mirror space in an instant. At the same time, the entire supreme sanctuary exploded violently, directly shattering. Russell reached out and pulled the terrified temple mages to his side. How so? Kaecilius even has accomplices. At this moment, not only Wong was shocked and angry, but everyone else was similar. Russell was also heavy in his heart at this time. He had never liked that kind of bloody bridge, so he had been guarding against someone secretly destroying the last supreme sanctuary, but he didn't expect the other party to be hidden silent, and he didn't feel it until the energy burst out instantly. There is no solution to this, because he can't stay here all the time, even if he just stopped it. Moreover, he also sensed that it was the power of the black magic dimension of the same origin as the Dark God Book. Russell did not know if the other party was a believer in Sithorn, and the man fled after destroying the sanctuary. The most important thing right now is something else. Bang! At this time, there was thunder in the sky, but there was no lightning. It was the sound of the dark dimension tearing the barrier. The starry night in the sky has disappeared, replaced by a huge rip. Countless magnificent terrifying energies surged inside, and the shrinking planet that had been squeezed out of energy re-emitted light and began to devour new worlds. The temple mages looked desperate, and they all knew what this meant. It's over. No one can stop the invasion of Dormammu. We still lost after all. Run for your life, Master Russell. Maybe you can leave a fire for humans. At this moment, even Wong thought so. Dormammu has arrived, and there is no possibility of a turnover. Russell took a deep breath. He didn't expect to come to this step after all. He took a step forward under the astonished gaze of everyone, and made a spell-casting motion with his fingers crossed with both hands. In an instant, a green light burst out from the Agamotto eye on the chest. Time rough? Wong showed a shocked look and said, "You actually know how to use it?" Russell calmly replied, "It's not difficult, it's just that I don't really like manipulating time, because while you play with time, time also plays with you." The next moment, Russell stopped speaking, and twisted the time law array in front of him hard. The city that was swallowed in an instant retreated and recovered under the reverse flow of time, and the rift in the sky gradually narrowed. However, as it gets smaller and smaller, the energy of the gap is significantly more concentrated. That's Dormammu resisting. Seeing this, Russell no longer let time go backwards, but waved his left hand lightly on his right arm, and suddenly a time magic array representing an infinite loop began to rotate on his right wrist. The next moment, in the shocked eyes of everyone, he flew towards the rift in the sky without hesitation. Isn't it just to talk about conditions? He will too. As he flew into the gap in space, Russell saw an indescribably magnificent universe. It's not dark here, and in addition to the huge colored stars visible to the naked eye, there are also various brightly colored nebulae-like energies pulsating. It was the same scene as he remembered, but only one thing was different. The huge form he imagined with giant purple eyes, Dormammu, did not appear. At this moment, a flame appeared not far away without warning. It first revealed an extremely ornate magic robe with mysterious patterns. Then the flames rose inside, condensing limbs and a flame head, as well as an incomparably simple facial features. The next second, a hoarse voice sounded. "Hee hee, I've been waiting for you for a long time, human. Is this the consequence of playing with time?" Things happened, but Russell didn't panic. The terrifying magic power burst out from the body in an instant, and two giant magic arrays with hundreds of meters appeared above and below the flame people. The next moment, dense, silver-white lightning burst out from the magic array. Magic mystery, lightning enchantment. The lightning with the aura of silence easily annihilated the flame man who suddenly appeared. But Russell was not happy. He looked back and saw that the mysterious flame man in the magic robe appeared out of thin air again. However, just as he was about to continue casting spells, The other party quickly raised his hand to stop him. Originally, I didn't believe that Fiorucci said that you would bombard me with magic when you met, but now I do. Stop, at least today I'm not your enemy. Russell had a new spell brewing in his hand and asked, "Who are you again?" Hearing this, the black mouth in the flame head suddenly cracked, and he laughed. "You entered the dark dimension and still don't know who I am? That's right, that's what you think. I'm the ruler of the dark dimension, Dormammu." The moment these words fell, the energy of the entire dark dimension trembled, exuding a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth. Russell frowned slightly. This is completely different from what he thought. The other party did not kill himself when they met, but seemed to be able to communicate completely. However, looking at the circular magic array at his wrist, he did not panic. At least under the power of the infinite rough stone, once the other party kills himself, then he will drag the other party into the infinite loop together. But at this moment, Dormammu spoke. "Don't get excited, the conditions have already been negotiated, relax." As Dormammu's voice fell, a golden light suddenly appeared in front of Russell, quickly outlining a door. The next moment, Gui pushed the door out. Episode 80. The golden doorway was pushed open, and Gui, who was full of light blue light, walked into the dark dimension. She still had that calm and gentle expression, and nodded at Russell with a smile in her eyes, mixed with a hint of imperceptible emotion. At this moment, Russell was a little surprised, but he also had a sense of clarity in his heart. How could Kaecilius's kind of waste be e'en to Ancient One? But he still couldn't figure it out. In his magical detective, there was indeed Guyi's spirit body in front of him. Although the state is somewhat different from that of normal spirit bodies, they are indeed not polluted by dark forces. In other words, it is not Dormammu who is currently enslaved the soul of Gui, but one is the supreme mage who protects the earth. One is the lord of the dark dimension who does not want to devour the earth all the time. Why do two sworn enemies stay together peacefully? This is completely illogical. As if seeing the doubts in Russell's heart, Dormammu smiled and said, "You are still younger, and after living countless years you will know that as long as the interests are enough, there is nothing that cannot be cooperated. Of course, this matter is somewhat mixed with a little personal grudge, but trust me, it's really just a little." Saying that, Dormammu pinched his thumb and forefinger and gestured, as if he really did as much as he said. But hearing the ambiguity, Russell was even more confused. He turned his head directly to look at Gui for an answer. Gui bowed his head slightly, and suddenly, the energy that appeared in front of him like starlight began to converge, forming a white-haired human wearing a red tights. However, this human being is obviously different from ordinary people, with a pair of eyes glowing scarlet and a complete evil taste. This is Sithorn, the god of dark magic? Russell had some guesses. The description of the other party he saw in the library of Karmatage, plus the eyes of the chaos magic manifestation, were very close. Gu Jian nodded. "That's right. And he is our target this time." Hearing this shocking news, Russell was even more puzzled. Do I still need to be involved in this matter? Although it may be a bit presumptuous to say this, his current height is indeed not up to that level. Although he can easily turn into a natural disaster-like existence now, there is still a certain gap between him and the Heavenly Father-level combat power that can destroy the planet with one blow. Not to mention beings like Dormammu, Sithorn, Mephisto. They can completely reach the level of a single universe at their own latitude. Thinking of this, he was even more strange. Why did Gui go to the dark latitude to negotiate conditions with Dormammu? And even the other party agreed. "Of course, you have to participate. You are the protagonist," Gui said with a serious face. "I will use him as a stepping stone for you to help you break through the barrier of the Heavenly Father. That's how I'm relieved." Russell didn't know what to say. Although he always called each other old ladies in his heart, he actually respected each other very much. Now hearing the other party say this, I was a little dazed for a while. The other party obviously wanted to give the position of Supreme Mage to himself and unload the burden. But he still didn't understand. Didn't the other party wait for Strange? And is it too good for yourself right now? As if seeing the doubts in his heart, Gui did not intend to hide them, and explained with a gentle smile. "After today, maybe we won't see each other for a long time, so I'll tell you everything. The purpose of the latitude fragment that Odin and I gave you is that one day, you can replace Sithorn, devour his black magic latitude, and become the lord of the magic latitude. I know the Dark God book is with you. Don't tell me you didn't think about it yourself," Russell said frankly. "Indeed, and more than once." Hearing this, Dormammu suddenly said in surprise, "What a confident young man, but..." Gee, although he came from a wizard back then, he became the lord of the dark latitude step by step. But he was very lucky, and the conspiracy was successful, and he didn't know where the confidence of this human being in front of him came from. In fact, Russell is far more confident than Dormammu thought. Because he has the system, he will only get stronger and stronger. Gui continued to speak at this time. "If you think so, then today is fine. But I still want to remind you that if today's matter is done, then you and Sithorn will form a mortal feud, and he will definitely take revenge on you when there is a chance." Russell smiled. Without today's events, will he be peaceful with me? He did not directly use Dormammu as an example. This demon god also stared at the earth all the time, but this time it must be Gui who agreed to the benefit. "Let's talk about my plan. I'm very interested now," Russell said with a look of excitement. After all, this situation is too rare. and looking at Guyi's expression, he should have already had a detailed plan. A look of appreciation appeared in Guyi's eyes, although she already knew this result, but at this time, Russell personally said it still made her feel that she was not looking at the wrong person. I didn't expect this to be so soon, Guyi said slowly. It should be that there was an accident when you brought Wanda to awaken, and in normal terms of fate, the witch marked by Sithorn will awaken due to great pain, but Wanda didn't. There is no hatred in her heart, the pain has long disappeared into happiness, and she even modified her age in order to be with you earlier. If so, Wanda will never become a Scarlet Witch. Sithorn couldn't hold back in the end, he used the last power left in the Dark Temple. Speaking of this, Guyi showed a smile like a fish hooked, and the flames on Dormammu's head shook for a while. He thought that the temple was well hidden, but it was just that I deliberately kept it for him, so that it was such an opportunity. When I found out that he used that power to descend on the doppelganger, I decided to fake my death. I played a play with Dormammu that made Sithorn think I was killed. The next step is to let you come in with the time gem, close the dark latitude, let him have no worries at all, and let go to summon his own power. When the time comes, Dormammu smiled and laughed bitterly. At that time, the power of the black magic latitude that he summoned will be ours. Haha, in the end, he's the idiot. Russell suddenly thought of something and asked, is God King Odin really sleeping? Guyi blinked, and the answer was self-evident. Russell's face twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This group of big guys is really a group of old Ingvi. I just don't know if Sithorn will lose his pants this time.